There we go. Now we're firing it up live. We'll wait for a few minutes for people to stream into here. Um, yeah, so you said it's hot down there?
Yeah, I mean, we got a high of like 88 degrees.
I hear
I
something
dressed
going.
up and wore this long sleeve shirt just for you, Ash.
Man, it looks good, dude. I mean, is that one of those that you can throw into the dryer? That's the ones I buy now. I don't have to iron them. I can throw them into the dryer, and if I take them out right when I hear that buzzer go off, they're good to go. If I
Yeah,
leave
wrinkle
them,
free.
if I leave them in too long, they're not wrinkle free.
I don't think anything is.
No, they're not. They're not. All right, we'll fire it up here. This is I'm going to say this is trucks, products, people, and pricing today, Charles, because I like that. This covered all four of the things that we had to work on. So Charles De La Torre again, and myself, Ashley from Materials Exchange, MX Broadcasting Network, live on Monday morning. End of the month, Charles reminded me this is the one where we're putting out a bunch of fires, even though you don't want to say fires in a manufacturing plant of lumber. We'll do it anyway. So what's going on today? Trucks, products, people, and pricing. Charles, it's fun to talk about before we jump into this.
Well, we're just hoping the last week of October was not like the last week of September where you couldn't find any trucks. I mean, we've got a good bit of wood sitting on the ground that needs to get from point A to point B, and we've been working on trucks for some of them for a week and a half. But the last week of September was brutal. And obviously it's end of quarter two, so that may have a little bit more of an influence than the last week of October, but that's still yet to be seen. It's Monday.
So yeah, we're seeing the same thing. I mean, last week I think we talked about on one of our shows. We went onto one of the rate sheets and it was like $12 a mile on a haul. I'm like, huh?
Yes, Alex won't be there.
It was just listed at that. I don't know whether it's straight, but there are some numbers out there that are crazy on traditional moves, right?
Yeah, I mean it's interesting. I think right now on 150 miles we're paying $6 or $7 a mile,
Yeah,
and then they're coming back, and so 300 miles round trip, averages out at like 450, and then they're coming back and reloading and going to a second desto, and I mean they're getting paid all the way around, and it makes it interesting.
So I saw Adam from Boston is on. Eric Wagner with DevCon Construction, and how do I say that? Milpitas, California. Nick from Chicago showed up. Hey, Nick, good to see you today. And Mitch from Bishopville is on too, I think. So hey, what's your secret to booking trucks in this market? What do you like? Is there any things you look at differently, you handle differently, you do differently in this kind of market?
Well, you try to utilize that capacity a lot more efficiently. So if you've got somebody that's interested in an outbound load and they're within a 50-mile radius of our plant, we'll try to get them, because of our close proximity to some of the Southern Yellow Pine mills, we'll try to get them to fit 2 loads in one day, so maximize profitability on the truck, which therefore we try to negotiate that rate down. But it doesn't always work out. The number one claim for people not wanting to do it is having to tarp wood. And that's kind of the last of a dying breed, and we're hoping a lot more people invest money in tarping systems, so that way trucks flow more efficiently and effectively. Because I mean, the tarping systems at these mills are cumbersome, and it doesn't really assist in the efficiency of the whole process.
So what do you mean? So do you still have just the traditional guy that throws it up on top, gets up there and rolls her out and straps it down type of thing on the tarp? I mean, that's when I think of tarping a load, that's exactly what I think about, right? I mean, what is that? People don't want to do that anymore?
No, they don't want to do that. Even
Okay.
at mills with tarping stations, they'll drive around them and then show up and it'll rain, or they drive through a rainstorm in September, October, and wonder why we're refusing the wood. Well, it's soaking wet. It's not bright anymore. That turns into a big problem.
What is it charge? Not to get too different. What does it charge? What are people charging now if you could actually get somebody to tarp it?
$100 to $150 a load.
So there's a point where they're worth it. I remember as a kid, sometimes these truck drivers, some would be so damn big, I'd have to pick them up on the forklift to get them up on the back to actually take a tarp off, right?
Yeah.
No, and I guess when you think about it too, it's a dangerous thing getting up and down and off a truck to do that, right? I mean, if you do it,
but I mean, a lot of these guys have ladders and some other
Yeah.
things to assist with that, but also we place tarps on top of trucks and on top of units, top of load, so it's a lot easier
You
than
know,
it used to be traditionally.
and if you're going far enough, even if you're paper wrapping something, it's still better to have you still got to put a tarp on it. Otherwise, you get all that road grease and all that off of it if it's raining really hard. But usually, if you're not going too far, when you paper wrap stuff like you guys do, that certainly helps, right?
No, it definitely does. But then, even if you paper wrap it and say it only goes 200 miles, Southern Virginia or around, Raleigh, it still presents a problem with the end user because they can no longer use that paper wrap because that truck just went 80 miles an hour down I-95. And not only do you have road grind, but you have wind ripping paper off and tearing it up and what have you. And whether it's pine or spruce under that paper wrap, it creates a big problem.
That's right. That's right. So let's. You and I talked last week after we had Brian Westbury on talking about inflation isn't transitory. That's a pretty cool conversation with him, I thought.
No, it was definitely interesting.
Yeah, I mean, what I pulled out of that is, I wasn't in that camp yet. Of there's a new normal on pricing. I'm still trying to get my head around that, but damn, he had some compelling reasons why all this extra. I'm not an economist, but I love using this M2 money is like sloshing around, and everything's like 30% higher, right?
30% seems to be kind of the benchmark from what we're seeing. I mean, you look at the freight market, any lane is up at least that, if not more, depending on your destination, whether it's Northeast, South Florida, Central Florida, what have you. So if you take that one variable into consideration on top of pricing and inflation as far as 2x4 through 2x12 material, no matter the species, it's evident, it's tangible.
Yeah, so we're talking about that. So reloads continue to fill. You and I have had the conversation of just reload inflation is probably starting to hit. I mean, people are trying to figure out, kind of like Riley months ago said, lumber last year was like toilet paper. Well, everybody's trying to buy they're going out and trying to buy their milk and eggs and stock them in the freezer and put them on their own shelves and store stuff. And no different with lumber. People are trying to buy their product for as far out as they're comfortable with the sell price, right?
Definitely. I mean, that puts the bottleneck in exactly the topic you just touched on as far as reloads, because you've got a lot of species that historically don't touch reloads, such as Southern Yellow Pine.
It's a great point.
It creates a problem, and then turns on that stuff. If you've got multifamily guys or anybody really that's buying and taking positions, sticking Southern Yellow Pine or any other species or any other product in a reload, and they're not turning it for 90 days because the job site doesn't need it, that ties up that space at that specific reload for an extended period of time, where historically that's something that turns 30, 45, 60 days at most.
Man, Charles, that's a great point you hit on. You think about it, traditionally, nobody ever put 2x4 or 2x6 Southern Yellow Pine on the ground at reloads. You just never did it because it didn't make sense. You were adding too much cost to a product that usually moves within 200 miles where it's produced at. You'd put 2x8, 2x10, or 2x12 on the ground occasionally when there was good basis on it or when it was just cheap, so to speak. Mm-hmm. But I would guess that there's a lot of 2x4, number 3, number 2, 2x6, number 3, number 2 on the ground at reloads now, which normally never did that. That usually went to brokers and people that were taking risk, would hedge it, whatever, would sell it eventually in the future, but it never made its way to reloads. And now it's making its way to reloads, right?
Definitely.
Yeah, no doubt. So changes in the market from the last week when we talked. I mean, you and I talked last Monday, a lot of movement on pine. I mean, during the week when we've been chatting, what are you hearing from mills when you talk to them not trying to buy 4-inch pine?
Yeah, it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen, especially when you look at any type of MSR rating. I mean, MSR is a ghost, and you can't get anybody to quote it, and it makes it's extremely difficult for your trust guys. And a lot of trust guys are having difficulty finding number 2, and they're paying up for number 1 just to fill the need because of the pricing structures that they put together based on the inflation that has happened over the past 18 months.
So
they have the room to do that, whereas traditionally they didn't.
We've got a bunch of number 1 2x6 up in Minneapolis right now, right? That we're moving. We got some loads from a mill of 2x6 2,400, all the way. Went all the way up to New York. I mean, and we could have sold it 10 times, right? We had a few trucks. We'll have some more this week off of a contract. But yeah, it's crazy what's going on there. The wides 2x8, all these wides jumped in price double digits last week on print because I think you basically said nobody's going to run 2x8 anymore if they can split it, right? I mean, some you will at some places, but for the most part, 2x8, right?
Well,
Is kind of
I mean, you think about a 2x8 number three, which is $400, and 2x4 number three is at $600. Why would you not rip it in half? Because the
yeah.
majority of your 2x8 number three is going to make a 2x4 number three. It's just optimizing your finished good. I mean, it's what we do every day. The mills are in a position to where the volatility and the spreads between your specific dimensions are large enough to where they can add that extra step. Where once again, traditionally or historically, they didn't.
What are you seeing? What are you seeing as far as the spruce market, both in European and North America, Canadian coming down there? Is there any interesting plays or anything you're seeing develop down there on that? I mean, there seems to be less and less euro that I'm seeing. I'm here, but when I say that, then you talk to these reloads and they're full of euro, and I think that has more to do with inability to get trucks moved out, right?
Well, I mean, I think the real question as far as what's inventory or what feedback you're getting from reloads or warehousing is what's sold, what's actually got somebody's name on it that has a destination, whether it's in the future or it's current, and it's still working on trucks, right? So that's really the meat and potatoes of the whole deal. If you're looking at, I don't have any room to take any more wood, I mean, that's all well and fine. But if they have 15 customers that sold, a break bulk shipload full already, but their customer doesn't want it, but they want him to lock in a price, that's a totally different ballgame. So that's where the real rubber meets the road. And once again, not to be cliche, to understand where prices are headed. Then you've got some other variables as far as, your tariffs and so on coming from Canada. What kind of effect is that going to have? And I don't know that anybody knows the answer to that question. As far as Europe goes, I mean, some of the Swedish and German guys, I mean, they lock in contracts quarterly, and those contract prices for Q3 were elevated compared to what they could do in North America. So a lot of it stayed over there.
Sure.
And then, the reload and warehousing scenario is going to put them in a pinch again to where that bottleneck recreates itself just with a different variable.
So you're really good on. I like talking to you on the panel markets too, because you kind of live in that world of OSB and plywood, with what you do at your facility, right? And you kind of have to be, you have to be tuned in to kind of what's going on in those two different markets. What are you seeing on OSB and I think we talked a couple weeks ago, and then last week, it is still fluid and moving, but it's not catching the bite yet that the lumber's catching. Is that still kind of seem to be what you're seeing out there?
Definitely. I mean, plywood is elevated, obviously.
Yeah.
At extraordinary levels compared to its competitor OSB. I mean, you look at 15/30 seconds versus 7/16 in OSB. I think there's $150, $200 spread, which, at some point, most panel traders or people in general would think that gap would close itself, but it doesn't seem like OSB's got the traction, as you mentioned. And why? I don't know. And maybe it's because a lot of mills sold out into, low fours, mid four numbers through, the middle of November, and they just quite frankly don't have any production to sell, or they don't want to sell it because they don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, I think I agree with you on that one. It's or there's still some big players that still have a large amount sitting on the ground, right? I mean, that could be. So I was just looking. You've got some stuff up today. Tell us a little about, you got some 2x6 104 and 5/8, number 2 Southern Pine, and 2x6 116, number 2 and better Southern Yellow Pine. What a great product for multifamily jobs, right?
Definitely, especially because of, you asked a minute ago, you asked about the biggest opportunity in the Southern Yellow Pine market. The biggest opportunity is 2x6 studs versus spruce.
Yeah.
And, had an interesting conversation. And once again, it's educating people on, do you buy a 2x6 10 and cut it at a job site, or do you not? Well, majority of the people that buy spruce studs, they don't think about buying a 2x4 10 and a 2x6 10, even though there is a price discrepancy between a 2x4 104 and a 2x4 10, or a 2x6 10 and a 104. But in Southern Yellow Pine, it's a topic of conversation. It's a pinch point. So it's a matter of understanding what is that roadblock that prevents your end user from thinking about it from the same mentality.
Well, so they're thinking about it, because I had a call this morning with somebody all the way up in Nebraska asking about 2x6 and 2x116s and 104 and 5/8 they saw in here, right? Because it can darn near make it all the way up to those locations relative to what the spruce market's trading at, right?
Yep.
And I think that old traditional thought of Southern Yellow Pine, what it used to be 20 years ago, is a lot different. The way it's finished, dried, processed now, it's a damn nice product.
Well, especially if you're partnering with somebody that has the opportunity to kind of sell you a two and better product, right?
Yeah,
So
for sure.
when you look at it from an appearance standpoint, it's going to look better than a number two spruce, in my opinion, because it's not going to be as waney. Because you're going to have a mixture of number one and in there as well. So when you have the delineation between the two grades, it should give the perception that it's a better stick. But once again, it's taking the understanding of the historical way and how do you bring it into the 21st century, the
Well, you think
23rd century now.
when you
Sorry.
your product is going into job sites that traditionally took spruce into there, and people said they would never use pine. And it's going there and it's showing up. And they're like, "Damn, this looks good."
It's not too bad.
It's not too bad. I think I want more of
usually
this,
the way it goes.
and it's generally because you know why in our market, the same reason why we're getting people on a digital platform, and it was hard for them at first. They're a product of what they've done their whole life, so they're afraid of it. Once they use it, they're like, "Wow, this is great. I need more." And it's like you said, it's a two and better product. It goes into the multifamily stuff, and you're getting some pretty good traction on this product now.
Yeah, I mean, it goes in ebbs and flows, and I mean, obviously, it's going to be indicative of what the market is on that stud trim and the alternate, right, or
Yeah.
the opportunity between the two. But mostly, it's the traditional thought process of a 10 to a 104 is really the biggest thing that we have to combat. I mean, we're in the process of instituting some new internal processes to where we can actually bring more value to that and be more price competitive with a 2x6 104, even when there's not huge spreads like there are right now between spruce and pine.
Right now, one thing I get a lot of calls from people that want these special 2x4 trims where mills will only want to cut 2 or 3 cars. I think people should realize that's one thing that you do a lot of also, right? So you'll take product and make 94, 92 and a half or things like that, right? I mean, is that sound right, Charles?
Yeah, I mean, we do a lot of for modular manufactured housing. I mean, we do a lot of pre-cut rafters, floor joists, things of that nature, to where it's odd dimensions: 184 and an eighth, 185 and 7/8, 126, 141s. So it really presents a real true value to being able to provide that turnkey process that they're used to when utilizing a stud cut product from a mill, right?
Yeah.
But once again, I think it goes back to thinking about it in apples to apples scenario. So if there's a price difference between a 2x6 10-foot than a 2x6 104 and 5/8, or 116 in a Southern Yellow Pine, but that opportunity also presents itself in spruce. So why are people or don't question the 2x6 10 to 104 transition in spruce, but they question it in pine?
Yeah.
When in all actuality, it's the same process. You still have downfall, you still have people you're allocating, and you still have, labor tensions or bottlenecks, however you want to describe it, to where it costs more than you actually think it is.
So, question for you. There's some big companies out there, national companies, that say they do what you do. Maybe they do. So why are you better at some of this? And why are there certain people that aren't using you because they don't know about you that should be using you? Like what's the biggest misnomer why people maybe don't use you or don't call you, or, who should be calling you that's not right now? Let me put it that way.
Anybody that wants to have a conversation about stud trims or custom trims, whether it's spruce or pine. Honestly, with our ability to grade mark European spruce and trim it to whatever custom length we need to, it creates a real value on that side. But also, the opportunity against some of the conglomerates, for lack of a better way to describe them, is the fact that we're a lot more fluid in the market because we don't hold such large inventory volumes.
Right.
We go out and we take calculated risk based on what the market demands or what our established need is. And obviously that can grow as our customer base grows, but also our production capacity. Right now, I mean, we're sold out almost the entire month of November. So anybody that did want to call us would be talking about, into November or December wood, which isn't an issue, but we're constantly bringing on more capacity. I mean, we'll probably double our capacity by January of next year roughly probably cutting about 2.4 to 2.6 million foot a month. So it's a scenario to where we're open to having a conversation with whoever's willing to have it, but we got to look at we want to make sure that we're having the conversation about total cost, not a per piece price, because it's no matter what, if you're looking at spruce or pine, once again, there's going to be a discrepancy between the two.
Well, one interesting thing, Charles, that brings up a great point. You and I were talking about it. A lot of people that went and decided, heck, I'm just going to put it on the ground myself. Man, they just got hit by some trucking inflation that really you would actually absorb a lot of that in the meantime, which you have ways of dealing with it. But they're like, okay, I'm going to put it on the ground 200 miles from this job, and they do, and all of a sudden that truck went from $1,000 to $3,000, right? So you didn't. Not their fault. They didn't know, but all of a sudden you get hit by all these variables that you didn't know that you've dealt with your whole life in this industry, right? That you're like, yeah, that happens. So basically, if you're out to November, I mean, that may be a good conversation for people. We put Charles's email down here to ping him on something, but also he's got some great items up on Materials Exchange. He's been a good supporter of ours. So, come on to mxlumber.com and come and take a look at what we got to offer up here also. Anything
now, Ash, let me say this though: when you have an end user that sticks it in a reload and they have a freight increase, and let's just call it 50%, that lane goes from $1,000 to $1,500. I think that's a little bit more realistic than three times, right? Yeah. But they don't hear about when we have to eat that cost because we quoted a delivered price and we have to perform. And there's plenty of times where, obviously, as you mentioned, we have the opportunity or the ability to kind of hedge that a little bit,
sure,
or alleviate some of that by negotiating contracts and so on and so forth. But the customer doesn't think about it when we have to eat it because they don't know about it. And that's a big piece.
It is. It is a big piece. Not only that, is you're out in the shop rolling up your sleeves and doing the work a lot of the times too. So this is
not a lot of the times, man. Now we got too much going on. We've got expansion going on. We've got adding production capacity. We've got new people. We've got, we're in the process of hiring some more sales guys, and it's a lot of hats to wear.
Yeah, for sure. Well, look, I appreciate we're up against. We did it in 20 minutes. It's probably a good time. So I'm looking forward to doing it this week with you. Keep the stuff listed up there. So Charles is C. De La Torre at ifpwood.com. Send Charles a note if you really want to get involved in some of the best 2x6, 104 and 5/8, 116 and 5/8, 2 and better trims, and he's starting to get a reputation for some of the best multifamily trims in the Southeast. So please.
Why do you set the expectation so high, Ash?
Dude, I mean, all I'm trying to do is living up to what you tell me about, man. You know what I mean? It's like Will Ferrell said, you're the songbird of your time, man.
Okay. I appreciate the kind words. Okay.
All right, guys. I appreciate it, everybody, for showing up. We'll look forward to you tomorrow. We've got Mike doing futures from the free seats with Greg Kuda. Wednesday, I've got the boys coming in for This Week in Lumber. We're going to have a surprise special guest. Last week we had Brian Westbury. Thursday, lunch with Lumberman, and Friday we finish up the week with our Smart Market call. We got a surprising guest on there too. We're going to keep shaking the industry up and creating some transparency. So, Charles, looking forward to talking to you. Have a good week.
Yes, sir. You too. Thanks for the time.
You bet.
Bye.